You know that feeling when you look up at a clear, starry sky and just feel small, totally overwhelmed by the scale of it all? Or, on the other hand, have you ever looked at something simple, like a flower, and felt this intense pull to figure out exactly how it works? Well, it turns out those aren't just similar feelings. They're two totally different ways of seeing the world. Today, we're going to dig into the difference between awe and wonder. See, one is a feeling, the other is a question. And learning how to switch between them, it might just change how you see, well, everything. This old German proverb it nails it, doesn't it? It basically draws a line in the sand between two ways of experiencing the world. On one side, you've got the layman's pure amazement, that kind of stunned, passive reaction. And on the other, you have the expert's active wonder. That's the drive to get in close and ask, okay, but why?
So what is the real difference here? I mean, is it just about how much you know? Or does something fundamental actually shift inside our minds when we go from that feeling of awe to asking the question of wonder?
Yeah, and getting a handle on switching between these two modes, it's not just some neat mental trick. It's a seriously crucial skill. Being able to go from that huge, big-picture awe to the nitty-gritty, detail-oriented wonder, that's what keeps us from getting tunnel vision. It's what allows us to connect with the world on a much, much deeper level. Okay, let's really dig into this. Section 1, Awe versus Wonder. We're going to break down what really separates that jaw-on-the-floor feeling from that deep, driving curiosity that just won't let go. So the original German words for this are incredibly specific. On the one hand, you have Staunen, which is awe. Think of it as that passive, heart-led feeling you get watching a meteor shower. It's just a pure reaction. But then you have Wundern, which is wonder. That's the active, mind-led thinking that kicks in right after. It's that little voice in your head that goes, wait, why is that happening? How do orbital mechanics even work? See the difference? Awe is static. It happens to you. But wonder is dynamic. It actually changes you because it makes you go out and learn something.
And this perfectly captures the relationship between the two. Aristotle knew that awe is the spark. It's that first moment of fascination that makes you stop in your tracks. But it's wonder that takes that spark and fans it into the flame of science, of philosophy, of real understanding. You could say awe gets you in the door, but wonder is what makes you explore the whole house.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about the world of the expert. This is someone who pretty much lives in a state of wonder. They have this kind of double vision, but, it comes with its own unique problems.
Just think of an expert's knowledge like a really powerful lens. A microscope for a biologist or a massive telescope for an astronomer. They can zoom way, way in and see all the intricate details, the hidden machinery, the complex dance of parts that are totally invisible to the rest of us.
But here's the catch. What happens when you're stuck in zoom mode? When you spend all your time looking through that microscope, you're probably going to miss what's happening in the rest of the room. This permanent zoom mode leads to three big dangers. First, you get tunnel vision. The expert is so focused on the complex guts of the machine that they completely miss the obvious, simple solution. Hey, maybe it's just not plugged in. Second, you lose all context. You're studying one tree so intensely that you have perfect data on its bark, but you have zero understanding of the forest it's in. And finally, communication just breaks down. You get so used to your own technical jargon that you can't explain your amazing discoveries to anyone who isn't also an expert. So what's the fix? Well, it's not about throwing away the microscope. It's about mastering the art of stepping back from it every once in a while.
This is honestly the perfect metaphor for this whole idea. Think about it. When you're standing with your nose right up to a Monet painting, you're in wonder mode. You're analyzing the individual brushstrokes, the dots of color, and frankly, it's just a confusing mess. But then you take a few steps back, and your perspective shifts into awe. Suddenly, all those confusing dots merge into a breathtaking garden. The true master needs to be able to do both.
And that really is the ultimate skill we're talking about. The point isn't to choose. You don't have to be either the detail-obsessed expert or the big-picture layman. The real goal is to build that mental flexibility to zoom in to analyze, and then zoom right back out to appreciate the whole beautiful picture.
So how do we actually do this? I mean, it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to actually practice it. So let's look at a really powerful historical framework that was basically designed to weave these two ways of seeing into one coherent worldview. A really profound example of this comes from Islamic tradition. The idea is that the entire universe is like a book, and it's filled with signs, or ayat. In this view, you can either read the grammar, the analytical laws of physics and biology that you figure out through wonder, or you can step back and just grasp the story, that awe-inspiring beauty and meaning of the whole thing.
This framework actually uses different names or attributes to describe these perspectives. For example, al-Zahir, the manifest, is the big picture. That's the panorama, the view you get when you step back in awe. Then you have al-Batin, the hidden. That's the microscopic view, the hidden laws and details you uncover through scientific wonder. It's basically a built-in model for holding both of these views at the exact same time.
And when you start practicing this kind of dual vision, your whole perception of the world begins to shift. A forest stops being just a pile of timber and becomes a living, breathing ecosystem. An opponent in a game becomes a fellow human being. Nature transforms from just a resource we can use up into a message we need to understand. This is where knowing something turns into a way of being.
Which brings us to the most important point of all this. The ultimate goal isn't just to see differently, it's to live differently because of it.
This quote, which people often attribute to Goethe, is so key. What we know literally shapes what we're able to see. If the only language you know is the language of chemistry, you might only ever see life as a chemical process. But if you also learn the language of awe, you can start to see it as a gift.
And this leads us to a classic thought experiment. If you're walking through a desert and find a perfectly crafted watch, nobody would believe it just assembled itself by chance, right? You instinctively assume there was a watchmaker. Well, the universe, from the laws of physics to the biology of a single cell, is infinitely more complex than a watch. So the question this framework poses is, when we wonder at all that complexity, where does that wonder lead us? So, ultimately, this is what I want to leave you with. You now have a model for two different lenses, the microscope of wonder for taking things apart, and the panoramic lens of awe for appreciating the whole. The real question is, as you go about your life, which one will you use? And maybe more importantly, what will you choose to see?